All right. Welcome, everybody, to the first of a series of sessions that we're calling Community Help Desks for the current Darwin Core public review. There's a link on the slides to a shared notes doc that has a bunch of other links, including the slide deck. So if you'd rather follow along on your own computer, you are welcome to. My name is Erica Krimmel. I'm the North American Regional Representative for Tadwig, and that's the capacity that I'm coming to you guys today in. My background is in biodiversity information science, and I've worked for the past 15 years or so, mostly with natural history collections. If you would like to change your Zoom name to include your affiliation, you're welcome to. That could be a good way for folks to get to know who else is in the room. Also, when we get to the discussion part of today, if you want to introduce yourself when you are talking, please feel free. I want to start off with just a few context setting slides for anyone that's maybe less familiar with Tadwig or the review process for our data standards. So here we are hosted. This event is hosted by Tadwig, or Biodiversity Information Standards. It's a professional society, but run by volunteers, and we develop, we adopt, and we promote data standards. Darwin Core is one of those data standards, and it's maintained by a maintenance group who, again, are volunteers that work to keep the data standard updated and alive, and they do things like all the prep work that goes into preparing for a public review like this. So John Machorik is here, and he's, I'm just going to call him like the number one person in the Darwin Core maintenance group. And then data standards get used by data aggregators, collections management systems, collections such as yourself, if you are at a collection. Shouldn't assume that. The review process for Tadwig is pretty simple. Anybody can propose a change to an existing standard at any point. There's some requirements for demand, efficacy, and stability. We can talk more about that if folks are interested. But basically, you see something, you say something, and then you wait for the volunteers in the Darwin Core maintenance group to kind of organize and gather issues into a public review. That public review is the time at which we get lots of people involved, and Tadwig tries to publicize what's going on. Typically, they last for 30 days at least. And then at the end of the public review, the maintenance group kind of tidies up the feedback and goes ahead and makes changes as the community decided. I want to flag that in 2026, Darwin Core as a standard will be moving to scheduled releases and scheduled public reviews. So this waiting period will be a little bit more predictable. And then this is the same information in a different format. I wanted to call it out because Tadwig has something called the vocabulary maintenance specification. There's a link to it at the bottom of this slide. And this is the official document for this official process. So for the current review, the review started at the beginning or in mid-September. And because it's a kind of complex review, it's going for a minimum of 90 days, potentially longer. And so that 90 days is the 16th of December. Okay, and then I want to talk briefly also about what's actually under review during this time period. So the document on the left is showing the relationship of the Darwin Core data standard, which is what Tadwig maintains, to implementations of that data standard. So many people here might be familiar with Darwin Core archives. That's a way that if you are a museum publishing data or someone else publishing occurrence records for biodiversity, that's a format that you might share them in via the integrated publishing toolkit or other sources. Those implementation schemas are not necessarily maintained by Tadwig. They're not governed in the same way that the data standards are. So what's under review right now is highlighted in yellow in the diagram. We have a conceptual model, a data package guide, and then changes to individual terms. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of those very quickly. So the conceptual model is the first bucket of what's under review. You've maybe heard in the past Darwin Core referred to as like a bag of terms. So that is what Darwin Core has been for a long time, is just let's not overcomplicate things. Here's some terms, put them together as you will. And the conceptual model is really kind of taking a step beyond and saying that here are the relationships between classes. And the reason to do that is to provide more consistency. So if you're implementing Darwin Core, you can kind of design for interoperability. Um, this is, I think, been a long time coming, and there's been a lot of work and thought that's gone into this conceptual model. So in terms of participating and having opinions about it, um, there's a lot more documentation that's all linked on the Darwin Core review page. And if you want to provide feedback, that is going into a comment on GitHub, which is linked on this slide and also on the Darwin Core review page. Similarly, there's a data package guide. This is a pretty technical document, and it's specifying requirements for data sets to comply with the implementation schema of the Darwin Core data package. This is also a document that if you want to review and provide feedback, that feedback goes in this single GitHub issue. And then the last thing that's under review are changes to individual terms and classes. This is like kind of what we picture as a more like typical Darwin Core review period, where there's a lot of GitHub issues. Each GitHub issue is for a very like granular term or class level thing. And those discussion about those happen at the issue level. So for example, well, here's a GitHub milestone. We can look at all this more if folks want an orientation to how things are organized in GitHub. But there's a milestone for this public review, and it groups issues that are all related. So there's 177, and on an individual issue, you see all of the details like, oh, this is about changing the term type status and moving it from the identification class to the material entity class. Details and discussion happen within the issue. And during a public review, some issues will be resolved and move forward and be changed, and some issues will not get resolved, and that's fine. They'll get addressed in a future review. Because this particular review is so complex, John, I think mostly John, has created these issue summaries, which we can sort for in the GitHub repository. And the issue summaries are really nice because they group things by class, and that lets you as a user kind of filter your interests. So you could look at the issue summary for agent, and you could see all the term changes or new terms that are related. Or you could look at the summary for taxon and similarly see all those. So that's, I think, John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of a special thing for this review because it has so many new and change term issues.
Yes, it's the first time we've done it.
It is nice. And that's basically it. I just want to end with a few tips if you are new to this process. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what these help sessions are for, but you're always welcome to ask anyone in the Darwin Core maintenance group, which John, Tim, and I are all here today. Ask questions whenever. The second thing here is starting small. I will just say that the emojis on GitHub are like kind of a great way to get feedback for the folks in Tadwig, for the maintenance group. It's often actually really hard to understand if an issue has no comments because a lot of people agree with it or because nobody read it. And so something like just putting a thumbs up where you agree is actually pretty helpful feedback and easy. And then a lot of issues end up having many comments and many thoughtful comments, and a lot of people who've spent a lot of time having comments. So reading through everybody else's thoughts is a nice way to contribute. And the flip side of that is kind of like assuming that although people may be very opinionated, their comments are coming from a place of best intent, and we're all in this together. No one is actually trying to die on the sword of any biodiversity data intricacies or whatever. And kind of on the same lines, like no one's really getting paid to do any of this. So, we're all here to support each other in this review process. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pause and let John jump in here. Yeah.
Um, it just occurred to me while listening to this that it might be useful to distinguish between normative and non-normative, especially because the two big things under review, one of them is completely non-normative and the other one is pretty much completely normative. Um,
I think that's a good idea.
yeah.
Do
And
you
it also
want,
comes to within term changes that the same thing applies to different parts of what's being proposed. You had a slide for it, yeah.
yeah, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So basically, normative is something that's there to help you understand what's required when you do something. Whereas non-normative is more informative. It tries to help you understand how a thing works without actually saying what the rules are. So that's the difference between the two. Functionally, in terms of the standards process, non-normative content, um, once it's been accepted as part of the standard, doesn't actually require that there be a public review if there's a proposal to change it, whereas normative content always does. Here, we're proposing an entire document, the conceptual model, that is non-normative, but because it's new and it's something being added to the standard, it must be reviewed. In practice, we also found that oftentimes non-normative content can have real-world consequences. So starting a couple of years ago, even with term changes, where they were just non-normative changes that were being proposed, we decided that we would always bring them to public review and that we would always try to find consensus on them because they could have unforeseen consequences that affected real world implementations. So that's the basic difference between those two things. Um, then again, briefly, the conceptual model document is non-normative. It's trying to help people understand um, how to do things in a way that would be compatible. And the Darwin Core data package guide is almost completely normative, describing what the rules are if you want to create a Darwin Core data package. So, for example, all the rest of what we've done related to this entire public review with creating table schemas in frictionless data packages are compliant with that Darwin Core data package guide. It follows the rules that are set out there.
Thank you. I do think that's a helpful thing to describe and a bit nuanced for folks. So at this point, let me stop the recording. But where?
Oh, also Ben is part of the maintenance group.
Oh, yeah.